All right, so we're going to revisit a topic of Alex struggles shopping because there's a lot of them. Whenever he does anything shopping, and it's this Alec, obviously with a little microphone flag. Um, so I'm not going to name the name, but if anyone watched this before, you all know this story. The quick and dirty version is I bought the wrong thing, surprise, multiple things that were tied to a Christmas gift and I'm still dealing with it. I got a refund on one of them, and this and anything. I got to check my emails. It's a whole thing, and it does not give me a lot of enthusiasm for a brand that was always a tier one brand for me. So that being said, let's use that example, Tati. In the new world of A2A meets MCP and the other things that we know, how would you envision this experience that I've had potentially being a whole lot better go forward if the brand understands what we've been talking about and the way maybe a multi-agent system could step in and connect some dots with their technical infrastructure and otherwise and make for a wonderful experience for me when I mess up my shopping, which is pretty much all the time.
And here's to hoping your situation will be resolved before next Christmas.
Hopefully, we're 50% of the way there and it took 4 months. So, hey, we're getting there.
We were talking earlier, like how do you, if you're combining this A2A MCP, let's pick a, Salesforce plus Writer plus Box, right? If we're saying that we're pulling this
Good
together,
combo.
we could talk about a real-time customer journey orchestration, right? Will be something like what you had to deal with, or let's pick an example that's something very common and very real. Let's say a delayed order, right? That you have customer contacting support for a delayed order. Hey, I don't have my package, and instantly AI agents will pull this data from Salesforce, which has your purchase history, and the Box has your shipping documentation, and they can have a personalized documentation through Writer, all without human intervention. And then you're cutting response time from hours, to be generous, many times we're talking days, right, to seconds, and resolution time costs by 3x 4x, whatever it is that we're looking at. So that's one way in which I think it's very real that this comes together. Using that same combo, we can talk about also, which would apply to you in some ways, also the autonomous exception handling piece, which I love to hear Steve's thoughts on this as well. But like when an issue arises, the agent teams can diagnose these problems. They can generate this documentation in Writer, put it in Box, update Salesforce, and they communicate this progress to the people that are involved in this, the customer at the center of that. And then you have this exception resolution time decreased by, let's say, on the conservative side, 60 to 80%. But not only that, dramatically improved documentation, but you have in so many cases not to engage a human to work on these exceptions, which if you are in retail, my friends in retail out there in hospitality, we know that these exceptions are not really exceptions. They happen every single day. So, there are ways in which we can automate this in a very effective manner.
Yeah, I'm curious, Tati, on that example with the exception handling. How does it normally work in a traditional retailer today? What you've seen in terms of like an experience, like a return, right? If they're like, what are the human aspects and the delay areas that occur when an experience like Alex happens within a retailer?
It's a great question. You have, in most cases, you have the key here is the delay and escalation. You have to escalate. And usually when you're talking about exception handling, you're talking to escalating to a human, meaning this goes via whatever system you have. Let's pretend it's email or Slack or chat, whatever it is, to a supervisor, the famous let me speak to a manager, that has to then look and say, yep, we're moving forward this way, or no, we're not moving forward this way. A lot of times that exception handling has a decision tree attached to it, which denies the exception much earlier than it should. So then Alec either asks to speak with a manager, which he's already upset about, and is also taking additional time from that supervisor's already really busy schedule. So that creates a whole set of productivity issues. But beyond that, many times Alec is not going to ask to speak with that supervisor. Which for the company, in terms of customer experience and in terms of loyalty, is way worse because Alec at this point in time has given up. He no longer wants to deal with this problem. You already told him no. He's going to eat whatever $100, $200, $500, $1,000 expense that he's made here because he's done with this, right? So this is well beyond. There's a cost to this, which is the productivity cost that's tied to this, which is easier to calculate, but there's an opportunity cost which often gets lost in these calculations when you're talking about customer experience, which is the cost of someone no longer engaging with you. It's often under represented, and it's under it's calculated as something much smaller than it actually is.
Can I jump in on that?
Halo effect of the bad experience.
Let me jump in on that, Tati. And you all know what I'm going to say. And then, Steve, I want you to jump back in as well. The lifetime value, not to use the management consulting speak, like this brand is so great and instrumental and could be a brand that we would be very loyal to and spend a whole lot of money with because it fits directly inside of one of our favorite activities, right? And so therefore, this is a very costly mistake, especially if you were to magnify this, because I can say to you guys right now, you know what it was? I bought the wrong size bowl that's a mixer bowl associated with the mixer that we already had versus the one that was the assumption that, yada, yada, right? Amongst other things. So it's something so simple to explain and swap out, yet here we are 4 or 5 months later. And that to me is just bananas. So Steve, I'll let you jump back in.
Yeah, and the reality.
I just want to, before Steve jumps in, I really want Steve to answer. How are we solving for this?
Yeah, totally. Solve it, Steve. This is crazy. I want my kitchen materials. I want to cook.
Well, I think we've all had these experiences, and the reality of what Tati said around, having a bad experience and giving up, like we've all gone through that. It's like if you hit a wall, if you hit a blocker, and eventually you're like, I'm just giving up. I'm going to eat the costs. But the reality of it is you're probably never going to buy that brand again, right? Like if you had that bad experience, you're never going to go back and buy that brand or go to that retailer, go to that store, or buy something online. So, I think, and Tati, you mentioned kind of the aspect of loyalty. Loyalty programs are not always loyal to the consumer. At the end of the day, it's like there are some experiences where you get a really good consumer experience that you appreciate that brand and you are loyal to it, right? But then there are others where, they just kind of throw points at you or whatever. So it's a topic for another day. I would love to talk about like the loyalty experiences that are out there across various aspects of retail and other industries. But to answer your question, Tati, around like how do we make it better? There's a couple things that we're building, right, that will help with that. And I think these are relevant across all aspects of what's coming out with AI, right? There's the concept of conversational AI. So you're talking to AI like it's a human. And then there's an aspect of being able to tap into data and information, kind of the brain of the system, which could be the brain of the knowledge of the retailer, their products, the knowledge of the consumer, and then the actual aspect of getting work done or tasks done or workflow, right? And I think when you have a seamless experience, that everything's automated these days, and we just expect it to be seamless and not have to escalate to get to a human to get stuff done. And when we do, we get frustrated when we have to escalate to humans. So conversational AI has to be able to answer the questions and go through a workflow that creates a compelling user experience. That is becoming more and more common. The ability to have those conversations and create those discussions and to use Tati's words, that decision tree, right? In the sort of the old models of customer support, that decision tree might have involved a human in the loop. Now we are actually able to have the AI and the conversational AI go through that decision tree and get to the right outcome. But you get to an exception point, and how do you get approval for that exception and maybe that's a return or some aspect of it. So you have to have trigger points that allow for it to go back to let's say Salesforce in your example, customer service center, and be able to approve it. There's also a rules engine on that side that exists where the AI can make determinations of, can I approve this exception without a human in the loop? But how fast you move when it doesn't require or doesn't allow for AI to make that decision is going to make the compelling experience back to Alec. So how do you get to a customer service desk and say, this person's asking for this thing, and can I give them, ship out a new product that's the right size? Yes, right? So somebody sitting behind the desk being able to surface that question and be able to approve it very quickly in a matter of a second. And so there's a couple aspects of things that we're building to enable the human in the loop, which is within all these systems, how do you train the brain and allow the AI to basically understand the rules of the retailer and then create outcomes that focus on the task or the workflow that's going to exist, but creating aspects of digital systems to allow for a human in the loop to train the brain along the way. And then you don't necessarily need the people to make those exceptions, and you get to change the rules. So we're building some of that. That's key. And then the third piece is on the workflows, right? Which comes back to the point around MCP and A2A and all that, right? How do you execute on workflows within the system? There's a lot of new technology out there. There's a lot of workflow systems that you can tap into that basically will enable the cross communications between the systems. So, protocols have been around for years, right? MCP is a protocol, and it'll continue to be, there'll be more protocols that come out. But the key and the theme of that is the ability for systems to talk to each other and within a ecosystem. And so that workflow side, we've built technologies on our side basically to help connect. We're using technologies in market like LangChain to help connect. We're going to continue to see what comes out, A2A, to be able to execute on agents working together, right? One agent that can tap in the system, one agent tap in this system, and then execute on work. It's super powerful. And the companies that get it right and do it seamlessly, and basically you don't have to go and escalate to a supervisor, right? And that AI conversational piece to bring it back gets the answer very quickly. If there's an exception, it gets proved very quickly. It executes on work, pulls data, and then pulls it back to the AI and says, yes, you're approved. We know where your address is. We're going to ship you out a different size bowl. And instead of 5 months, it'll take 5 minutes, right?
Yeah. Let me jump in on that, Steve. You just absolutely slaughtered that, and I appreciate that because you answered the question and you got into the weeds, but you didn't go too far, right? Which I really appreciate. And I think one of the things I want to say, just to make sure everyone's crystal on this, is that everything Steve just said is not only technically feasible and a reality right now, it's also something that isn't a single shot. Right? You are introducing digital labor that Steve just very eloquently explained is going to learn, like onboard a human, learns the way the system works and the way the company works and so on and so forth, do's and don'ts. And yes, it's going to resolve that challenge for me, but it's also going to be able to say, hey, Alec, I'm so sorry. Like, I know you're terrible at shopping. So number one, we got this sorted for you. And number two, we know you all love cooking. So now they're going to start to get to know me, and I'm going to have a little, AI agent that becomes my shopping buddy because I'm terrible at it, and it helps me do a much better job by mapping my consumption and my kit, what we already have in the kitchen, and then thoughtfully starts to curate content and appropriately reaches out to me and helps me make decisions a lot easier. Because frankly, I don't want to go shop somewhere else. I like this brand, but they're making it really hard for me. And I know that what you just described, Steve, enables them to not only solve the problem, but now you can recover and you can turn some lemons into lemonade, and now I'm super loyal because you're making it easy for me to not have to think about these things that I frankly don't want to think about and I'm not good at,
And that gets
The
back
most
to the loyalty aspect, right? Like the ability to provide proactive insights to you
Yeah.
as a consumer, knowing you as a consumer to say, hey, I know you had a bad experience, but here's something else to think about, right? Like that is,
And real quick, in a highly visual way, I'm a visual guy. So like if you use that writer platform or whatever and box and it's visual stuff, I'm not going to click into all the others. I don't need much. It's visual because they would know me, right? Whereas someone else might be a little bit different. So sorry to jump in on that. That's the customization, hyper personalization that's possible.
yeah,
and the most transformative aspect to all of this, when I think about it, is the compound learning effect.
Yes.
Because you're not talking about, when we talk about integration, and they sound so sometimes so like, system and tech and like, what does it mean, system data talking, that's what it means, is that it's going to learn as if it were a really, really, really big smart brain, and it then creates this, whether it is direct to consumer as your sidekick to shopping, or helping the organization on improving the operations across all of the different systems. It creates organizational intelligence. And as an operator, one of the things I'm most excited about, because when we're talking about, and Steve was talking about, okay, you have the input, and you have to train these models, and you have to put in the data that says, okay, this is what we like for this model to do, right? This is what I'm most excited about, is that this now interacts back with me to say, you should also add these 3 other things to your exception list. And you should also think about these other things as not being exceptions. And by the way, here's the data to prove what I'm telling you about. So this is a real-time interaction. It is a two-way interaction in real time, which you never had with other types of system, because even if you had a really, really, really smart operator behind it, you were going by some the data that you had was limited, no matter how good it was. And now it is no longer limited, and it is a two-way conversation. So it's not incremental, it really is exponential, not to use a jargon word here, but it is in tasks that require these multiple human touch points across days, now become smarter in seconds.
And that's the
And it
magic.
allows for
Yeah.
that human to be, which we've been seeing this, by the way, for a long time now in healthcare. It allows for the humans to focus on the things that really require that human touch on, not things that could be automated. So that's something that I'm really, really excited about.
Yeah. I was just going to say that's the magic of compounding, Tati. You nailed it. I mean, that is extremely important. So it goes from a one-off situation to a multi-agent framework and relationship that I have with a sidekick and so on and so forth. So solve the problem, continue to help me better understand, how to build that loyalty and keep becoming a very loyal customer. And then everybody else in the company benefits from every single one of those, multi-agent or single agent experiences internally and externally, because the brain is getting so much smarter over time, and helping all of us tap into that appropriately for whatever it is that we as human beings are trying to solve for in any given internal or external context. This is why everybody gets so excited about this, territory of the next wave of enterprise AI, because boy, does that, smell a lot like competitive advantage,
absolutely. Absolutely.
All right. Well, that was a good one. As always, good to see you, Steve and Tati, and we'll do this again soon.